Welcome to MarketPlay, the marketing podcast where we chat with small business owners and entrepreneurs all about what they do and how they got to where they are. I'm your host, Meryl Hathaway, and we're brought to you by Two Trees PPC out of Sacramento, California. So sit back and listen to our conversation as we chat all about business, and welcome to MarketPlay. Hello, I'm Meryl Hathaway, and today our guest is Sean Campbell, founder and CEO of Cascade Insights, a B2B market research firm. He has been training, mentoring, and educating his whole life. He is an exceptionally well-regarded conference speaker and author who has delivered talks for Fortune 50 companies and top-tier conferences, as well as authoring several books on technical as well as business topics. He has been a professional services firm owner for over 20 years, with his work spanning consulting engagements with Fortune 50 companies and startups you've definitely heard of. He brings a wealth of knowledge when it comes to surviving and thriving as a service firm owner. I am delighted to welcome Sean to the show. Good morning, sir.
Hey, thanks for having me on.
Yeah, absolutely. We're going to jump right into our first segment of the show called Getting to Know You. It's just a series of this or that questions I'll ask, and just don't think too hard. First instinct response is what we're going for here, okay?
Sure, sounds good.
All right. Tablet or laptop?
Laptop.
Okay. Coffee or tea?
Used to be coffee, but it's been tea for a number of years for a reason I could get into later if you want. But anyway, go ahead.
By all means, if you want right now, go for it. I'm actually a new tea drinker myself.
Well, it's weird. I don't know why, but we've all had days where you miss the coffee. Something happens to your schedule or you're on a flight and you're like, oops. And I don't know. Tea has a little less caffeine, but even the fact that it only has a little less, I don't get the same caffeine hangover if I miss it. So that's one huge reason. I don't know why. I can read caffeine ratings just like anybody else. So it's, an Earl Grey isn't that far off from like a K-cup, let's say, but I don't know. And then the other thing is it's just not quite as acidic. I don't know. I mean, there's something about it that's kind of nice. I don't know. I haven't gone to put like cream in it or gone full British or anything like that. I tend to just put a little bit of sugar in it. I don't know. And the only other thing is I was a Star Trek Next Generations fan, so he liked Earl Grey. So maybe, just maybe that has something to do with it. I don't know.
Okay, I'm gonna geek out for a second. I grew up watching Next Generation with my mom, and she has the communicator badge pin, and we had a Jean-Luc Picard cardboard cutout in our house for years.
Oh wow. Yeah. Well, no, I actually only one time, truly only one time, because when you say this, you're always like, no, you went many times. No, but really one time I went to a Star Trek convention. One time. I had a buddy of mine who wanted to go, and I vividly remember walking into the bathroom. This is a safe story, don't worry. And I'm walking to the bathroom, and there's an entire family, the dad and all of the kids, dressed in rank. Like actually dressed in color-coded rank from Next Generation. You know what I mean? The little kids are wearing like Wesley colors. You know what I mean? The dad is wearing like the Commander red. And then they walk out and the mom is like the science officer. And I thought, this is a little too much. I mean, like it's all, but I mean, you're at a conference where somebody's dressed as a Klingon or a Cardassian. So like maybe that's not too much. I don't know. But yeah. It was... I've told people then, now there's Comic-Cons and there's things that have taken off in a different way.
Yeah.
So there's definitely places you can go to see stuff like that. But back in that era, like late 80s, early 90s, that was kind of the only thing like that, at least that I was personally aware of. Yeah. So anyway, that's a divergent topic for a different show. But big fan of Star Trek, always have been. But yeah.
Yeah, and I don't remember for whatever reason that he drank the tea, but it is interesting. I agree with you. The less acidity, I think it just affects your body a little bit better. It's just tea is softer than coffee in some way. That's how I think of it. It's just the herbal nature of it, the fact that and coffee beans are natural too in their own way, but it's just different. And I also haven't gone for the milk, but I feel like it's in my future. I'm going to try it out, although I might do the, almond or oat route. So I don't know how British that is, but we'll see.
Yeah, at that point you're probably not. Well, at least you're not traditional British. But if they could have almond milk back then, maybe they would have. Who knows, right? So
it makes me hipster British. Okay.
Yeah. There
Instagram or TikTok?
Instagram.
All right. Building a business or maintaining a business?
That's so tough.
I know.
And I'll tell you why it's tough before I answer it, because if somebody asked me if I could have a mission statement of one word, the word would be balance, which sounds like it's maintaining a business. But the thing is, I really like giving growth potential to people and finding new things for them to do and new challenges. So I would have to say growing a business, but that one I straddle a lot.
Yeah. Yeah, I get that. It's a tough question for a reason. It's interesting to think about too. Netflix or YouTube?
Netflix.
Gotcha. We learn on YouTube, we veg on Netflix is how a lot of people say it.
Well, yeah, but my kids who are they're almost men now. They're really old teenagers, to use a phrase. They're old teenagers, right? And so like I should use that on them more often. You're old teenagers and see what they say. And so but they entertain on YouTube. I mean, that generational cohort, they use YouTube the way the rest of us went, wow, streaming services, and I can go to all kinds of stuff. And they're like, yeah, I know, it's YouTube channel. Yeah, I know, I get it. I had that before. I mean, and so, I'll watch them like entertain just watching YouTube videos for 4 hours, right? So I would say YouTube for me is education. Netflix is entertainment. So I go to YouTube plenty, but to me, it's more of an educational switch than it's anything else.
Yeah, I read it that way too. And this is the most random of the crop, Hawaii or the Caribbean?
Oh, Hawaii. Like the
Yeah?
Caribbean. I like the Caribbean. I mean, I should say I've been to Bermuda. So that's kind of the Caribbean, a little more exotic Caribbean. I guess it depends how you want to define Caribbean, but no, I've been to Hawaii a bunch of times. I like Hawaii. I'd go there.
Beautiful. It's beautiful. So many people are going to Hawaii right now, which I think is almost comical. Everybody was like, okay, I'm going to Hawaii the minute it's safe.
Yeah. Well, lots of people on planes these days, for sure.
Yeah. All right, let's jump right into the next segment of the show called Humble Beginnings. So, Sean, you have to tell us, what was your very first job ever? And this can be something that is like, seems like not even a job, like anything that you remember as the first thing where you got money for doing something long term.
Oh, that'd be McDonald's.
Yeah.
When going to work at McDonald's was cool and actually eating McDonald's was okay, which we would declare as the 80s, in essence, right? I mean, because you go to your kids now and you're like, let's go get McDonald's. About 75% of American old teenagers, to go back to that again, right? Like would say, ooh, could we go to Subway? Like, could we go? And I'm always like, why would I get a ham sandwich? I don't really I could get a ham sandwich at home. I mean, like, I want something. I don't want them to tell me it's unhealthy. I don't actually even really want to know it's unhealthy, but I like fries. And so, that was my first job. And I didn't, some people have this story of like, my dad had to come into my room or my mom and tell me to get a job for 6 straight months. And I finally got a job, and other people have different stories. I just wanted a job. I don't even remember anybody telling me. I went in on a worker's permit, if that makes sense. I don't even know if those exist anymore, but I started work at 15 on a worker's, where your parents had to sign off that you were willing to start your indentured servitude at 15. You know what I mean? And so there's probably like a really checkbox at the bottom that's like, so you really want to give up video gaming to go to work at 15? And I was like, yeah, I want to go, And so I was probably 15 3/4 or 15 and a half. And the River Oaks Mall McDonald's, that's where I started. And I got hired because they were opening a new McDonald's, a brand spanking new McDonald's next to where I lived. And so I was kind of trained in the one and then moved over for the grand opening in the other one. But that was the first job.
And were you a cashier?
The second job's a more interesting story than the first one, but go ahead. Yeah.
Okay. Were you a cashier or were you cooking in the back? Like, what were you doing?
Well, if anybody's worked in restaurants, they could probably already guess what job I had, I would hope, by the demeanor so far. When you go into fast food, they instantly put a meat cleaver when they do the hiring, and they're like, and nobody, hopefully nobody takes offense. You can't talk, but you're good with objects. You will go into the kitchen. You know what I mean? Like, you look like you won't burn yourself or destroy anything, and you look like you don't look like you talk to people. And then they take other people who are like, you don't look ordered, but you look fun. So we'll put you in the front, and we'll make sure you actually keep track of the money well enough. And so, like, that's basically, I was a cashier. I mean, I don't think I flipped a burger. I don't think I ever did at McDonald's. I mean, I picked up fries and all the stuff people do, but like, I was never in the back. I was always in the front.
Interesting.
And that, my restaurant career job, which is basically what I did all the way through college. I started at McDonald's and ended up working at the Signature Room restaurant at the top of the Hancock Building, 95th floor in Chicago, as my last restaurant job, which is where I met my wife. And I felt like I had a whole restaurant career for about 8 years, going through a few different places. And, but I never was back of the house. That said, this is no disrespect to back of the house. Back of the house is a great job, and a hard job, and a sweaty job,
So
and
hard.
not a, but no, I never was back of the house.
I've never been in the kitchen either. I worked at many restaurants. I served, I did hostessing, I bartended, I did all of that. If you had put me in the kitchen, I would have made fires. Like, I could never have done what they did. I would have made every mistake. I would have slipped on the things falling on the ground. The guys back there were like gods to me, because the way they could keep up with service, the way that they could just handle what they had to handle. It was, just almost to a degree of like, it was just outrageous how hard they had to work. And I was, we were all busting butt up front too, but there's also just a different level of what they have to keep up with. And if you've ever worked in a place that has like a high-end chef where they're screaming at them the whole time, which it sounds like you have, it's
Right.
insane back there. Oh my
Oh yeah.
gosh.
The other thing I remember about the back end is like, they had fingers of steel, meaning like, I remember the times like they would hand you a plate that was like 300 degrees,
Yes.
and they would hand it to you, and they wouldn't flinch, and you would grab it. And if you didn't know what you were doing, you'd grab it. And they were just, to most people listening to this, they're probably like, that's hyperbole. But if you worked in a restaurant, you instantly know what we're talking about. The back of the house staff could hold objects that were basically on fire and pass them over to you, and they would be fine. Yeah. And you were like, how do you even do that?
Yeah.
But one brief touch note, since we're just on this, my second job was actually the one that was probably the one that launched me a little more into like different things, although not so much directly, but I got minimum wage, but had the best benefits of any Burger King employee ever, because this is a true story. So I go to Burger King as my second job, and still making minimum wage, still running the cashier. And, but long story short, they asked for somebody to go to a meeting that is like going to be the district manager's meeting. And our store manager needed to take an employee representative. So they picked me. I was supposed to just sit there and be a wallflower. I wasn't supposed to do anything. And so anyway, they asked this question about like, how can we beat McDonald's in some way that I don't even remember? So I started talking. Well, apparently I didn't stop talking for like about 10 minutes, but apparently people were still enjoying what I was saying. And so anyway, that all happens. Then a couple months later, they have to actually pick crew representatives to go to New York for this advertising campaign, one for every like big state region. So there was like 12 people, and they picked me. So I get to go to New York as a 17-year-old and participate in this campaign. And I had to sing this cheesy song that was like, gosh, I normally can remember it. Maybe I'll remember it before the end of the show. But I had to sing this cheesy song in front of a bunch of ad execs, all dressed up in our Burger King uniforms. And it was this huge ad launch. And then the final part of the story is like 3-4 months later, folks might remember the Jerry Lewis Telethon, which was this thing that was on that they did for muscular dystrophy. And I can't remember if they even still do it, but it was a big thing in Chicago because it was hosted in Chicago where I lived. I now live in Oregon. And so they needed a crew representative to give an $80,000 check on national television for the money they had collected from these little Rodney reindeers they sold, and every buck went to like, and so they say, would you like to be on national television? So here I am making minimum wage, and I'm only there like 6 months. So I show up on national television, and there's the punchline of the story. So I get home, I went there, and I got on TV, and it was an early slot. It was like 7 in the morning or something like that I was on, because this was a 24-hour telethon. So I show up and just, walk on stage, hand the check over, whole 9 yards. I get home, and my mother is just like angry face, like really. And I'm like, what? And my dad is sitting there like angry face. And I go, what happened? And they're like, your father didn't wake us up and record it. So to this day, I have no actual imagery of me being on national television. So buried somewhere in like the Chicago affiliates television archives is some video of a 17-year-old kid walking over and handing an $80,000 check. But I have no documentary evidence of the same. And my mom was just livid. She was like, how did we not get up for this? And I didn't care. I was kind of on a high. I thought it was cool. And, it didn't matter to me. But so anyway, so the second job was a little different than most. So
wow, that's hilarious and amazing. And it just brings me back to the time where, like, if you knew something cool was going to happen on TV, you better have a VHS tape in the machine and be ready to hit record, or you were going to miss it, because that was the only way to catch it.
Right. Although I'm glad that's over. I'm very happy to use YouTube TV. I could be a salesman for those guys, by the way. If anybody hasn't played around with YouTube TV, you should go look at it. But the no, I mean a digital cloud-based DVR that I just press plus and I can save it in perpetuity. I'm completely fine with that. Like when the Olympics thing came up in YouTube and it's like, what sports do you want to watch? I was like, all of them. And I didn't care. I just save them off to, they'll be, so some blinky lights in a server farm somewhere can just take care of it for me. And I'm completely happy with that. So
it's pretty cool. Yeah.
Anyway, what other questions you got?
Oh, I got many. My dog is barking behind me. So before you can hear it on here, I'm just going to grab him and move him. Excuse me 1 second. Be right back.
I didn't even hear it. So you're
okay, good. Okay, good. He's a sly little devil. All right, so all the way from McDonald's and Burger King to what you do now. So what led you into your current business? And I know that it's a long journey, so obviously we need to skip through some of the parts, but what got you from where you were working in restaurants all the way to what the industry that you're in now and everything you do now? Was there, some of that trajectory I'd love to hear about?
Well, the restaurant thing was probably more helping me with communication, right? Because I went from one, I ended up in fast food, then went to full service restaurant, then ended up, working in the signature room for 2 years and, having a lot of focus placed on good communication, obsessively so. So that was that piece. But I'd always wanted to be a college professor. Actually, that's what I wanted to go be. And wasn't entirely sure in what discipline, but that's kind of what I wanted to be. Like I liked history and I was getting a communication degree, a bachelor's degree, and then I got a master's degree in comm. And then a woman entered my life who became my wife. And so I decided I didn't want to be a poor husband. I wanted to actually have a job that paid something. Although to her credit, we have a phrase that says, she says, I would have followed you to Waterloo, because the PhD program was going to be in Waterloo, Iowa. So we say it sometimes. And so she was fine with it. I just felt, I wanted to I didn't want to starve for 4 or 5 years getting the PhD. And so at the time I thought, well, can I get a job teaching? And so what happened was, while I was going through all this communication focused stuff and getting my master's degree, I was kind of a bit of a closet geek in that I had PCs. I had built some PCs. I had, obviously there was a lot of gaming then. I'm like a young, teens, 20s guy. But I mean, I understood a fair amount about computers. So I decided to put my name up for this job at New Horizons Computer Learning, which basically at the time was training people on productivity software when mice were new. Like, for example, I trained a class once where somebody put the mouse on the floor and tried to use it as a foot pedal. I'm not making that up. I mean, like, this was the era where all of that was new, like completely new. I literally had a guy open up a CD-ROM tray, for people who remember what those were, and he tried to use it as a cup holder. I mean, I like, no lie. I mean, these things would happen, right? But I got a job teaching that era of people in the 90s, like how to deal with graphical user interfaces and mice and all that kind of stuff. So that was my transition from taking teaching into business. And then I did that for a while. New Horizons was not the most awesome place to work. I started with 30 fellow instructors in the Chicago office. And by the time I left 6 months later, I was the last instructor out of the 30. They had horrific turnover in that place. And so, like, absolutely horrific. Anyway, then I ended up, another big accelerant was this place called Metamore, where I had probably the best boss I ever had Jerry, where he took me from being this guy who was like apps and user Word, Excel, PowerPoint teaching, that kind of stuff. And he saw something in me and he said, would you ever want to teach like networking and databases and kind of like harder stuff, stuff that technically I probably should have gone to school for? And he's like, but I think you could learn this. So anyway, I start going through certifications for it, and you would get a certification test, you'd pass it, and then you could teach that course. And there's a lot more to it. Oh. But anyway, long story short, I started passing a lot of those, got a lot of certifications, ended up teaching a lot of those things. Jerry gave me a few different raises along the way to keep me motivated, and I was enjoying it anyway, and it was all good. And then that led to a couple more teaching jobs that were similar. And then I decided, I wonder if I could go do this independently. So I was at this place called Eris Corp, and I was one of 4 instructors. And 2 of the guys, Bob Carver and Scott Swigert. Scott Swigert's still my business partner today. The 3 of us decided we're all going to quit on the same day, and which my boss loved. But I was a 29-year-old, not so smart guy. Let's just put it that way. There were elements of hubris in this move that I don't really think are the smartest thing I did in retrospect. Or maybe I say that whenever I think employees are listening, because I'm like, please don't do that to us. And so, like, but we did. And to be honest, it wasn't the best place to work. I mean, it wasn't New Horizons, but it wasn't the best place to work. But they did all right by us. And so anyway, we decided we were going to leave. And so we founded our own company, 3Leaf, which were 3 independent instructors kind of sharing marketing and sales assets. And then the next click in the journey was a meeting around 2002, 2003, where we brought in some business advisors. We were starting to grow the company, bringing in contractors, bringing in employees. And the guy said, Sean, have you ever thought about, well, actually, I'm getting the story slightly off. There was a step before this. I'll make it quick. So we're growing with Microsoft. Microsoft was our first account. When working with Microsoft was cool. It was literally our first account. And I decided in about 2002, because my dad had done sales his whole life, very different sales, small group health insurance sales. But I felt like I could do this. The 3 of us got together and said, we'd like to grow the business with Microsoft. And I said, well, I think I could do that. I won't teach as much, but maybe I'll make the same salary as the 3 of us, but I'll spend some of that time growing Microsoft. And so what happened is, in about an 18-month window, we became from a 600,000 or so company to a $2.3 million company, mostly off the back of the Microsoft business, which on one level wasn't smart because that's too much off one account. On the other hand, back to that, now I'm 31 and maybe not so smart. I decided it was fun to grow, and it's thrilling to work with a company back then that was as cool as they were back then. And then we added Intel as an account, and so we balanced things out at least a little bit. And that company grew, and then we decided to sell it in 2006. That was fun. I mean, it wasn't the kind of sale where I bought an island. It was, but so I still had to go to work the next morning, but it was interesting to go through that whole life cycle of even, there's certain moments on the entrepreneurial journey, much like having a family, raising kids, that you just don't forget. And like, one of the things is me walking into a staff and saying, we sold the company, and all the work that went into before I said that phrase, and all the work that had to come in after I said that phrase. And so that, that's one you just kind of don't forget. And I guess it's a sign of how I'm wired, that most of my memory of that has nothing to do with the money. It has to do with how the people, and that's just kind of how, it goes back to balance. When I said balance earlier, like I was really striving to make that a balanced outcome for everybody as much as I could, even though I knew I was creating disruption just by the act of doing it. Right. I just was. And so anyway, then Scott and I and Bob, we kind of wander around in the wilderness for a little while after that, because you got to think about what you want to do next. Scott and I decided to get back together. Bob's a really good guy, but if there was you always have slightly different balances in a management team, and Scott and I got along a lot better than maybe me and Bob did. And so Scott and I have now gone ahead and continued to run Cascade since 2006. And the transition point between the two companies was pretty simple. At the very end of Three Leaf, we were doing competitive analysis on technology, and we decided, well, it would be really interesting if we did competitive research and started talking to customers and buyers and whatever. And that kernel of an idea led to the growth of Cascade. And so now we're 25 plus employees spread out across the US time zone wise. Wow. Just because we have competitors, I won't say how much revenue we have, but if anybody knows a 25 person high-end professional services firm, you could probably make a swag at what our revenue might be. And it's been great. I never want to go back and work for somebody. I just don't. I don't mean I couldn't.
Yeah.
There are people I think that get to a point where they're really kind of toxic because of the business and that kind of, but I'm not that. If I needed to feed the family, I could go do it, but I don't have any desire to go do it. This is to tie it to the full story. I get a lot, I should say a lot, because I do miss teaching, but I get a lot of my ability to educate, mentor, a ton of an ability to learn. Because for me, most of my life, if you had a, internal combustion engine of how my brain works, like inputs and outputs, I go learn something and then I want to go teach somebody it, period.
Yeah.
That's pretty much my entire life is that. If I have a hobby like fishing, I want other people on the boat with me so I can teach them how to fish. If I own a business, I want to have more employees so I can teach them how to be more effective and kind of grow and do different things. If I was a technical instructor, it was the same thing. I don't really know how to operate in any other place than that. I don't think that's a problem. I think that's great, but that's business in a way that I didn't expect gives me an opportunity to always think about problems and solve them and educate. And this is a kid who thought, in closing, the guys that got up at 8 a.m. to go to business school classes were crazy, because I was the liberal arts major who my earliest class was like 11. And so, the science and the business majors who were sitting in lab at 8 a.m, I was like, bad choice of major. You know what I mean? And my wife was a science major, by the way, in full disclosure. She was one of those people in those 8 a.m. labs. But I had no intention of getting here. None. Zippo. But I ended up here, and I'm completely happy to be here. And I think there's a lot to be said for that when we think about things. So anyway, I hope you wanted the story. So that's the story. So hopefully that was engaging and entertaining enough. But that's basically how I got from, a guy who wanted to be a college professor to where I'm at today.
Well, and a lot of the story actually involves everything that you did want, it just in different ways, like providing the mentorship that you do and what you get from that. And having grown to having the 25 employees, obviously that teaching instinct is still a huge part of what you do and how you operate your business. So you said a lot about why you like doing that. What do you think is the biggest impact of providing the mentorship that you do? Because if you're mentoring all of your employees, obviously you're setting them up for different things. So what do you feel like is the biggest impact by being someone who leads by mentoring?
I think there's a few things, I guess. If I was to summarize them, though, I'd say it's, one, one, you build a culture where people really feel like they can work interactively. I wanted to say collaboratively, but the word's so polluted now, it doesn't really mean what it should mean. But like, they can work really interactively. Like phrases I say all the time around here are, I'll never count the number of times I've seen what you sent me. I want to be able to speak into it, not in a deconstructive way, but I want to be able to like empower you to feel like, even if you're just stuck with a headline and you're like, can I grab 60 seconds to talk about a headline? I don't need you to look through the whole I'm happy to do that. And the whole team here is wired that way.
Yeah.
When I do job interviews for folks that want to come on board, one of the things I always say is, if you're somebody who's like, I need to hold my thing close to my chest and I need to put it out there, and the only good feedback is, well done, no edits. Like, that's probably not going to work here. Not because we have this culture where we're like, everybody's nitpicking things. It's more like everybody wants to be able to help you understand whatever you need to know to solve the problem. And maybe some of that comes out of the fact that we started as a research firm. Maybe some of that comes out of the fact that, again, I don't have a problem learning and educating. Another thing I say around here all the time, which is really probably weird for a CEO to say, is you only know it when you know it. And I say that to new employees and they go, what did he just say? And I'm like, well, you only know it when because usually I'll say it when they've given me something and it's subpar. And yes, I correct it. And yes, I say it needs this and it needs this. And there's always that moment at the end of a call with somebody new where they're like, okay, did I screw up? And what's the outcome of this? And where am I? And I usually pop off with, hey, it's all right. You only know it when you know it.
Yeah.
Which is code for like two things, I feel, which is what I think people hear. That's what I hope people hear. One, I don't care that you didn't know it now, because I don't think you could have known it now. That was the whole point of apprenticeship and mentoring.
Yeah.
But at the same time, know it now. Like, ask me enough questions. Ask everybody around here enough questions so you know it. Because now you don't know it. You know what I mean? So now's your turn. Now it's on you. It's your ownership to say, okay, I don't know it. And that's one thing we sometimes have to push people on, because they'll say it to us. They're like, I'm so unused to a culture where after I'm done asking my questions, I can actually legitimately call you back up 10 minutes later and say, even though you're my boss or grand boss or great grand boss or whatever, and I can say, but hold on, I don't understand.
Yeah.
And I think that if I was to say the biggest flaw in a lot of companies when it comes to training and onboarding, it's they really don't, they do a good job maybe of injecting a bunch in people's heads. The training program might be good. They do a good job of saying, ask all your questions. But apprenticeship is the questions that come after that. It's the ones where you're uncomfortable and you're like, crud, it's now Monday morning. I sat in 5 days of training. I did understand it, but I don't. And there's a choice that the employee makes at that point that's super critical, I think. They make the choice to figure it out on their own.
Right.
Or they make the choice to call somebody. And if they feel empowered to call somebody, you're going to have a much better outcome. And if they make the choice to do it on their own, a lot of toxicity starts to kind of build up. Not that I don't want people to do stuff on their own, but we're talking about somebody learning, right? And where they're at. Because one, they thrash away at it, they really try, but again, they don't know what they need to know. So they're trying, they're desperately trying. And then there's this frustration of handing it over to someone and it's like, oh, it's not that good, right? Or it's just the stress in a virtual company of staring at a blank sheet of paper, not really sure what to send, right? And so I've been saying a lot, like, apprenticeship is what's lacking in modern business. Nobody wants to spend the time to apprentice. We all want to train, we all want to onboard, but even the word onboard sounds like you're getting on a train and once you're on it, you're done.
Yeah.
I mean, onboard isn't the word journey. They're not the same thing. And I think there's a problem with that, because I'm saying things that an apprenticeship, other people have said this part before me, but like, for thousands of years, it's how we learned everything. And yet we've turned and at the same time, here's what I find fascinating. Then I'll get off the soapbox. What I find fascinating is work itself, we know, has become much more between the ears. Work, we know, and this taking nothing away from blue collar jobs. My whole life growing up in Chicago, everybody I hung out with, like I lived in South Holland, Dalton, which was just across the border from the steel mills in Gary. So all my friends were like blue collar steel workers, cops, their dads. If anybody's seen the movie Rudy, that was like literally the area I grew up in, like literally. And so I have a lot of respect for anybody in that. But it's true that more and more jobs are transitioning to those kind of like technical, between your heads kind of jobs, ears kind of jobs. Well, they need apprenticeship.
Yeah.
They're virtual. They desperately need this kind of apprenticeship, right? And I just think where there's a gap there that we need to shoot, right? And hopefully we're doing it well here. I mean, we, like everybody else, have a lot to learn, but go figure. But that's something we're focused on.
Yeah, I love that. I think it's really helpful. I think support in general is what everybody needs. Support in all different ways. And apprenticeship and mentoring is support. It's not saying, go figure it out. I'm not going to answer your questions, even though I know what the answers are. It's saying, I know what the answers are. Let me help guide you to that and help explain so you know next time and you can keep learning from it. So I couldn't agree more. And I think it's a great way of running a business. So just another quick question I have is, so what does the age of narrow mean? I read about that a little bit, and I would love to hear what you have to say about it.
Yeah, well, there's a story that kind of precedes it that's pretty short. So
okay.
I walk into a meeting with a guy named Paul Logue, who was a vice president at HP. And I was now a slightly less dumb, maybe 39-year-old. And so I'm 51 now. So I don't know when I get to be like not dumb,
maybe never, Sean. Maybe never.
Maybe never. Right. But like, so slightly less dumb. And I walk in and the business was growing. This was the current business. I was pretty pumped about kind of all the cool things we were doing. I was flying down to Silicon Valley regularly and meeting all these kind of cool tech companies. And so I roll into the meeting and Paul Logue says, do you do this? And I say, yeah. And I tell him all. He says, do you do this? And I say, yeah, we do this. And he says, yeah, do you do this? And I say, yeah, we do this. And he holds out his hand. Never a good sign. Never, ever a good sign. If a client ever holds out their hand, just expect bad news. And he says, I know you want to keep the aperture wide open, and then a dialogue ensued. And the kernel of that thought stayed in my head for a number of years. And it kind of grew into this philosophy of marketing, which then I eventually ended up kind of calling the age of narrow. And I'd even probably call it a philosophy of sales and marketing, which is just that people today need you to explain what you don't do more than they need you to explain what you do. And that's super important in a world where people don't trust content. I mean, I'll give you a canonical example from the consumer world. I'm standing in Home Depot the other day, and I'm looking for a pressure washer because ours finally died. Little funny side note, our house is about 21 years old now. It's 18 years old now. And it seems like the warranty on everything has decided to go bad precisely this year. Like every physical object we own in the house has died. Like they all gave up the ghost in the exact same year because they're all 18 years old. So like the microwave died, the fridge has issues, the pressure washer we built a long time ago has died. So anyway, I'm in there looking for a pressure washer and I'm flipping through the reviews. And they're all glowing, of course. So I go sort to the 1-star reviews, which I think a lot of us do because we don't trust content, right? And then worse yet, I go look at the 5-star reviews. Almost all of them were part of some, what did they say? It was like product announcement program or some weird phrase Home Depot used. So they were paid reviews. And then I go to Lowe's, and Lowe's, all of them in parentheses at the top, part of a paid promotion, part of a paid promotion, part of a paid promotion, right? Well, written review, but I don't know, when you get a free pressure washer, how often do you complain about it, right? And so we have this, so I tie these threads together. You've got people don't trust content. They wander up to your website. You are out there shouting to the world all the things you do. And all of a sudden there's like a disconnected wire. And the disconnected wire is they want to know what you don't do well. And so now you have an interesting problem. If they go connect the wire themselves, they will do it only a few ways, all of which are bad for you. They will go to your competitor's website, and your competitor will now say what you don't do well, which you don't want. Or they will go to some third-party arbiter, like in the B2B tech sector that we live in, like, the Microsoft, Azure, Google's, AWS's of the world. They might go to an analyst firm. They might go to a third-party review site. They might go to something like that. And what I found is people are pathologically unable in their own marketing to say what the company doesn't do, and who they don't serve. It's comical. We will run workshops with people when we're building content, and we'll say, so this thing, what does it not do? And they go, well, we serve this and we serve this. I'm like, okay, that didn't answer the question. Okay, so what's the company that you wouldn't be good at selling? Well, this one and this one and this one and this. Okay, you didn't answer the question. Okay, so who in the world is never going to buy this? And then they'll get frustrated. And I'll have to explain to them kind of a little bit of microcosm of this story and say, look, whether you like it or not, that's the way people treat content these days. They go up and they're determining how authentic it is by what you say you don't do. And then if you want any other validation on this, just go look at your Netflix queue and compare it to somebody else. I mean, maybe you're into Russian sci-fi and somebody is into period historical dramas based in England. We can specialize in anything we want these days. And people want that exactly in what most people would consider more boring B2B sales cycles, right? And so what we've found as we coach people is, if you think about the age of narrow, the people want you to narrow what you offer. They don't want narrow thinking, plenty of that on every side of the pie chart you want. But they want a narrow view of what you do. And you narrow it by saying what you don't do. And the easiest litmus test for people to do with this is go to your own website now, anywhere on it, anywhere. Does it say what your product doesn't do? Does it say what audiences it doesn't serve? Does it say what size of companies it's not a fit for? Or does it say what geographies you don't serve? And then compare that with your own internal data about decisions you've made. You've made all those decisions. And it doesn't mean that you're locked out of those things forever. If you want to go up market and you're currently down market, well, sure, someday you can make that justification. But I guarantee, absolutely guarantee, because we've seen it time and time again, even the lightest whiff of this, the lightest whiff of pixie dust of this stuff on your site, you will get more conversions and you'll get more people to engage with you, because what you're dealing with is this subconscious thing that people don't have even trouble articulating. That is, I desperately want to know what you don't do. It's how and the last thing I'd say in this, it's exactly how they interact with salespeople. Most of the questions with your sales team isn't about what you do. If you listen to the talk track, they're asking what you don't do. And marketers are afraid to. So anyway, so long story short,
yeah,
that's what I started calling the age of narrow. You've got to narrow down what you do within a way, what is somewhat of a negative messaging. But the trade-off is, now they're no longer having that defined by competitors or by third parties. You very concretely put that box in, and you end up with a lot better conversions, a lot better ROI out of the whole thing, a lot easier to sell the next customer. And the last thing I'd say on it is probably the place where this actually has the biggest flaw is at the very top of the company. Because usually the person at the top of the company is the one who's saying, there are no worlds we cannot conquer. And we're kind of the opposite. As we've grown and moved on, I'll give my business partner credit for this phrase, although we all use it around here. When a client asks us about our plans for growth, we'll tell them what we're going to do, but we always say the same phrase, but we have no plans for world domination. Zippo.
Yeah. I love that. I think it all makes so much sense. And it's a really interesting perspective on how to change that sort of way of discussing all of those things and putting it out in the forefront, but in a way that actually really makes a lot of sense and also says, we do this really well and here's what we're not going to do. It makes total sense to me. I can understand why some people are baffled by it at first, but I think you're absolutely clearly onto something, and that it's something really for people to consider with their own, like you said, on their website or wherever else. And it says all these things that they do, to also add, and this is what we don't do and what we don't plan on doing. This is our focus. And this is it for a reason. So
Right. Well,
yeah.
and one last thing on it too is that
Okay.
the reason I think it works so well, if people are like, well, we tell people what we don't do. It's like, unless you're explicit, I think the problem we're facing is um, nobody trusts what they read. And that's not meant to be a political statement. I think you could just, if you said that statement to a crowd of people, do you trust what you read? They would all give you a fairly lukewarm response at best, right? And then if you got specific and you said, do you trust marketing that you read? Oh, well, then you get a really strong ping. It'd be like, no, don't trust any of that junk.
No
And
way. Yeah.
So you what you're doing is, in this really weird way, by negating, by saying what you don't do, you're building trust. And I just, if people feel challenged by it, try it in some small way. Do it in a sales call. Write one blog post. Do something. You can delete it next month if you're just too nervous after you put it out. It's fine. But try it. Just try it and see what reaction you get. And I guarantee you this very last thing, what you'll get at about it is, it feels so rewarding, because what happens a lot of times, and I see this happen again and again, especially with us, because we do this pretty frequently in our marketing and sales. People say, I feel so happy that you told me that. Like there's almost this like relaxation. And what I'm feeling in that is this tension that we're relieving, because they felt they had to figure it out on their own. And the fact that you took it off the table and you just told them binds them to you in this just incredibly truthful, empowering way, that the minute it happens to you once, I guarantee you'll be like, I want more of that. That's like a way better way to sell and market than like telling them all the things we do, and they're kind of looking through it, trying to see what's a lie. Who wants that?
Yeah.
You know? I mean, who wants that? Anyway.
Yeah. All right. So to finish out the episode, because this was all we have so much information that came out, and I feel like it's going to be so helpful. I just want to throw out one question in our segment called Branded, and then we'll wrap with how to contact you. I have one question, and it's a multiple choice. If you get it right, you win. If you get it wrong, you win. None of it matters. You are already amazing. Okay. So how much is the market research industry expected to increase in 2021? Because it has been increasing, right? We know that, but how much is it expected to increase? And this is why it's difficult, because it's an expectation, so we don't know. But here are the options: A, by 12%, B, by 7%, or C, by 4.7%.
I'll go with the middle, because I don't actually know the broader market research, because we're part of a slice of it that's B2B.
Right.
And B2C market research is so huge. So I'm just going to take the middle because it's a safe bet.
Okay. So it's actually C, which is 4.7. So it's just under that 7%, which is still a huge increase, though, by 4.7%. I was like, wow. Yep. So I know you guys must see it always ramping up in what you do. But it just shows how it's so important to understand the research behind everything that people are doing. And I hope with all of the information that you gave away today, that people really listen to all these different things and understand that going to a company like yours also to find out all the research in order to make decisions and move forward and decide things. It's just so crucial. So, Sean, you've been amazing. How can people reach out to you, find you, ask you questions, all those different things? What are the goodies that you can give us today?
Yeah. So two things. If you're a B2B technology company, so software, hardware, whatever, absolutely reach out to us for market research support or marketing support. If you're not, don't. To my point earlier. So like, if you are, reach out. You can find us at cascadeinsights.com. You can email me at Sean, SEAN, at cascadeinsights.com. On the other hand, if you're just an entrepreneur in whatever lane you're in, or a business owner, it can be a little isolating to own a business. I mean, I'm fortunate that I have a business partner. Not everybody does. If you just want to chat about some of the subjects we've had, you don't have to be a client. I'm always happy to just chat with other business owners. So if you just want to have somebody to talk to about what you're dealing with, it's not a consulting fee. It's just a paying it back kind of thing. So you can also reach out to me about that. And that aperture is fairly wide open. That one I don't narrow, but but other than that, just thanks again for having me on.
Oh, my pleasure. It's been so wonderful. I feel like I really did learn a lot, and I think anybody else would as well. So thank you for being so open with your whole trajectory and your journey and all these different sides of it. And good luck continuing with that mentorship and the apprenticeship and really teaching people as they go. I think it's the best way to be a business owner. So kudos to you and how you're doing it.
Awesome. Well, hey, thanks again for having me on.
Yeah, absolutely. Have a great rest of your day and a good weekend.
Thank you so much for listening to MarketPlay this week. I'm your host, Meryl Hathaway. We're brought to you by Two Trees PPC out of Sacramento, California. Always fighting for the small business. If you liked our podcast, don't forget to subscribe, leave us a review, and share it with your colleagues. Have a safe week out there, and we'll see you next time.